This season on the art and science of complex sales, we're thrilled to present Tales from the Front Lines, a season developed for the leaders shaping the future of complex sales. We're bringing you straight into the action with the C-suite, VPs of sales, sales development experts, and top performing sales execs who are redefining success in the B2B world. These are the trailblazers that are tackling tough sales cycles, coaching sales champions, and aligning teams to deliver exceptional results. So join us as we unpack the hard lessons, the breakthrough moments, and the invaluable insights from the best in the business. It's more than a podcast, it's a guide to growing revenue with confidence. So let's get started. Let's go. This week, I am thrilled to welcome Amy Franko. Amy's on the front lines every single day from multiple perspectives. She's continually working to manage her own pipeline, sell to her own ICP, and hit her own goals. But by doing that, she gets the opportunity to impact thousands of salespeople and learn exactly what's going on in the market. A sales strategist, author of The Modern Seller, and a powerhouse in transforming sales organizations, she helps growth-minded B2B companies smash their targets. So grab your notebook, settle in, and get ready to elevate your sales game. This is the art and science of complex sales. Amy Franko, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am great. It's so good to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. I'm sure we're going to take it in a bunch of directions.
We absolutely will. The first direction is, it always amazes me. I mean, you live like 15 minutes north of me, and we're sitting here bouncing stuff off satellites to talk. We probably should have done this in person.
I always see people from our neighborhood, like at conferences. Like you have to go a couple time zones away to get to see people in person that you live by.
Yes. Well, the last time, that's incredibly true, because I think the last time we saw each other it wasn't time zones. It was, but it definitely was over 1,200 miles away.
Yeah, it was at the, the Objective
down in Florida
conference.
Yeah.
Yes.
Down in Florida. Well, we got a chance to connect there briefly. And one of the things that really has impressed me about you and following your career is the impact that you're having really on the front lines of sales. So I was hoping we could dive into that today. And first off, if you don't mind just kind of sharing what your position is right now, what you're doing, how you're helping people in the sales arena, and then let's talk about what's going on the front lines.
Yes, absolutely. So a little bit to the front lines piece of it. I got my start in technology. So for the first 10 years of my career, I worked for IBM. I worked for Lenovo in that technology space. And for most of that time, I was a quota-carrying salesperson. So I can absolutely empathize and relate to the front line of sales. And then after that first 10 years, I took a pivot into entrepreneurship and started an organization that got its start in learning and development. And as many organizations do, has morphed and changed over the years. And what that looks like today, I get to work with successful mid-market organizations, mostly in professional services, technology, manufacturing. And I work with their CEOs and their sales leaders on mostly like three areas: sales strategy, sales and growth, skill development for sales professionals and sales leaders, and then lastly, all of these structures that support a sales organization. Processes, things like comp plans, onboarding, all those things that wrap around a sales organization to make them successful.
So you got your start in the famed IBM sales training program.
I had an interesting start. I actually started as a marketing support rep. So Before I got into a sales role, I supported the sales team. And so it was a really great entrance into understanding what world-class selling looks like, supporting different sales representatives that were on the team. And then from there, it progressed into being a sales representative. So I really had a cool and interesting start to my career there.
That's awesome. I actually am not with IBM, but with a company here in town it used to be here in town until it was sold, called Alita. It was that kind of combined marketing support / proposal support / business development rep. They didn't really have the BDR formalized completely yet. So, but I found that to be an amazing spot to learn and grow and just kind of gravitate into where I wanted to in the organization.
Yeah, and I really what I loved about it is being surrounded by successful sellers, many of whom were women. There were a lot of
Mhm.
our team was probably 50-50 men and women, and so being able to have some of those role models early in my career, I probably didn't fully appreciate it at the time.
Mhm.
But looking back on it, I think about how impactful that was to be surrounded by successful female sellers. And there was one point in my career where my first, second, and third line leaders were all women, which is not a common situation even in today's markets. So
Mm.
I look back on that today and realize how impactful that was and how that's really helped to shape me.
That's awesome. Let's dive into how that translates to today and what you're doing with the organizations today. So you're diving in with CEOs, sales leaders, and helping them prepare their teams that are going out to market from a sales perspective. First off, I'm just interested in what you're seeing relative to what's happening based on the different types of clients. Do you see different things happen in the sales arena with different types of in different industries that you have?
I do. And one of the things I enjoy most about my work is that I go across a lot of different industries. And so what I'm seeing in some industries, so let's take maybe like manufacturing and distribution for an example. There's still a bit of a COVID hangover going on, if we're just being candid about it. A lot of organizations dealing with high levels of inventory. The cost of money is still high. You have a bit of a softening in the market. So there's a lot of forces at work impacting that industry. Not to say that you can't create success, but there are certainly forces weighing down on that industry. If I look at, say, professional services as an example, and professional services is really broad, there's a lot of subsegments in there. The clients I'm working with are highly successful, having some of their best years ever, and then looking to launch that into even more success. So those are probably a couple of the things that I'm looking at. I would say the common thread between all of my clients that I work with is there's a level of decisiveness with CEOs and sales leaders where they have the ability to say, regardless of what's happening around me, whether it's a force for good or if it's a challenging force, I still have to make decisions to move forward. And that's probably one of the common threads across all of my clients that I get to work with.
Well, let's talk about that level of decisiveness because across the world in general. So, from you being on the front lines, so your front lines when you're out there, are you seeing that has there been a shift in people's abilities to say, yes, this is what I want to do and move forward to? Is it harder or easier for people to make decisions across the board?
That's a great question. And I would say it's more challenging because a couple reasons. More decisions to be made, perhaps. So a lot on the plate, but also the way in which we bring people together to make decisions has changed. And I even see that with, if I just take like microcosms of sales teams and sales organizations, when you have teams that are highly remote, we've always had remote teams to some degree, but when you have highly remote teams or highly remote decision making, you do have to wade through more obstacles potentially to be able to bring everybody together, especially more complex decisions or complex opportunities, bring people together for that discussion, that consensus building. And my experience is sometimes in those virtual environments, those conversations, they could be a bit transactional if you don't have the right relationships versus getting everybody together in a room to be able to discuss what's pertinent and be able to actually make the decision.
So I have two trails of thought I'm going to go down. I'm going to capture one first and then we'll go down the second. So capturing this first one is in the industries that you're working with, what does good look like for a salesperson? What are the types of things that they need to be able to do on an ongoing basis to help people in a more difficult decision-making environment? I mean, there's more access to information than we've ever had, but decisions are taking a lot longer in general. What type of skill sets, tool sets, et cetera, does a great salesperson need to have to do that? I'm talking B2B sales.
Right. So maybe we can parse that off between like the sales professional and then like the sales manager / sales leader. There's going to be some commonalities, but so if we think about the individual sales professional first, If I were to maybe choose 2 or 3 things that I see as most important right now, resilience is definitely one of them. That's the mindset piece. The things that we think about, the way that we think drives our behaviors, and our behaviors drive our results. So if we think about starting with the mind first, our ability to be resilient is a really important. It's not even a soft skill. It's a real business life skill. So I would start there, and then if I'm thinking more tactically, continuing to do the work of filling your pipeline. That is consistent, everyday, grinding type of work, but it's so critical because without it, you struggle everywhere else. So I would say focus on pipeline and opportunity identification would be another one. And then I would say lastly, I'm going to put this in the business acumen category, the ability to distill all that information that you were just talking about and turn it into something useful for a prospect or a client. A question, a way of thinking about something differently, a way of helping a client or a prospect solve a problem that it may or may not directly relate to what you are bringing to the marketplace. But the ability to do that is something, I think we talk about that a lot, but the ability to actually do it and to be successful with that, that's a real difference maker. If sales professionals can do that, they're going to be able to do the other 2 things, be resilient, build their pipeline.
Past 20 years, we've turned sales into assembly line. Right. There has been, especially when you talk about like SaaS sales and then a lot of software sales and then a lot of other or industries have adopted that mentality. One of the things I think that has hurt is that ability to do a full basic business acumen, business analysis, and have those insights. And I'm with you. I see the people that can do that as people almost think of them as unicorns these days, but it's not. I think it's a critical sales skill that needs to be focused on is like if in general, if I'm going into a business, I need to understand how they make money, be able to question them and understand how they make money. What gets in the way of making money? What are the key challenges to doing that? How we're going to impact bottom lines with whatever I'm selling. I guess, do you see that more in market? Are there any industries that is really held on that people need to have that full picture of a business? Or because being in software myself for a long time, it's just people have lost that. And it's just been.
The way that I think about that, it's a really good point because sometimes if this might be a little dependent on the sales cycle, how long it takes to identify and close an opportunity. Sometimes there are what I call like more transactional elements to the sale, even if we're selling something that's more complex or B2B. What I try to coach my clients around and people that are coming through my programs, that business acumen and being able to offer insightful ideas, questions, sometimes that can honestly feel like a lot. And how am I going to do that for every single opportunity and every single client? And what I find is, how do we shorten that learning curve? Because a lot of the clients that we deal with have similar problems. They might be in different industries, but they have similar problems. And when we can find the patterns with one industry or one client set, a lot of those patterns will apply to other industries or client sets. So there's a pattern finding skill along with this that says, okay, I see this happening in this industry. What's the commonality in this other industry? But I think your statement's really fair, which is if you're in a role where you are making you're doing a lot of opportunity identification, you have big client sets, that can feel a bit overwhelming. And just being able to find 1 or 2 things to talk to that client or prospect about becomes a little bit more manageable. I never go into a client feeling like I know everything about their business. And I will actually say them, like, I will never be in your business as deep as you're in your business, but I want to learn. I will bring you ideas that I see in other industries so that you're getting a broader perspective. And that's a lot of what they really welcome is just that broader perspective, that different way of thinking. That was a long answer to your question. But.
It was a long question. Well, I boil it down to, and I love the art of discovery, right? I love that conversational framework that you can start to look at and help drive insights just through the questions that you ask. And that closes a major gap. But when the questions start to, in terms of business acumen understanding, where I've seen is that a lot more, at least when I'm being sold to, right, is a lot more of those questions, at least in the past 5 to 6 years, have been really more focused on things that are specific and incredibly narrow to the product that is being sold. Like, people don't have that ability to go above and beyond that and really understand. Like I was, sold a payroll system a couple years ago. It amazed me. It absolutely amazed me that people would not dive in and understand like all the different elements of the business that this impacted, so how they can make it go more smoothly. So I don't know. It's something that I've noticed, and I think you have a good way of going about getting after it. Don't complicate it too much. Just
one step at a time. The type of approach, you won't learn it all in 1 or 2 conversations. It might take, I've had clients I have worked with for years, and I learn something new every time I'm with them. And it makes me sharper, but I can bring some of those examples to other clients that are in different industries just to give them different ways of thinking. There's that pattern making and just making connections that if sales professionals can get better at those skills and work toward mastery, it does make all the other pieces of that. Being someone who gives good advice and is trusted, it makes it easier. I was also I was thinking about sales leaders for a moment, because I know I said I would attributes of sales leaders. I am finding that with sales leaders and sales managers, I like to help them think in frameworks. So when I work on something like, say, performance management for their teams, I like to help them think in frameworks and give them categories to work around. So, for example, I find that one of the best skills for a sales leader or sales manager, it's a little bit of art and science, but it's that accountability piece and helping to bring sales professionals along to make them truly accountable. And that's a 2-lane highway, right? There has to be accountability on both sides. So I would say a sales manager or sales leader it's an environment of healthy accountability, I would say, is very, very powerful. And also helping your sales professionals with the specific strategies and skills that they need to be successful. So that takes time to get to know like the people on your team. I can help a client shorten that through data. And we talked a little bit about objective management groups, using data to help them make those decisions. But I would say those couple of things for sales leaders and sales managers sets them apart.
Salespeople, you're talking about the things that were setting them apart is perseverance, continual pipeline building, and business acumen. And then sales managers, I think it's those 3 things. And then you're adding, on top of that, we're adding essentially coaching and shared accountability.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that, because the more things change, the more things stay the same, right?
What's old is new.
Yeah, and it really is. I've asked this question a number of times, and I'm getting that, and it's very cool to see. And I think there's a renewed interest in going back to self leadership and accountability, and being able to dive in there as a salesperson. And I think companies, I'm interested in your opinion on this, because I see companies starting to embrace that more. My evidence is we have a coaching platform, and coaching is on the rise in a massive way across the world in terms of multi-billions of dollars of growth in the industry. But I see people moving back towards that instead of in a full cycle sales rep, instead of the, hey, you do one thing, you just go do that, make 7,000 calls. Are you seeing similar stuff, or am I just out of my lane?
No, I think there's a lot of truth in that. And boy, making 7,000 calls, that sounds amazing.
Yes.
Right? Yes. I do feel that there is and I see it, I observe it, the mastering of the fundamentals. And one of the catches with having so much technology available to us is that we can have a lot of tools in an organization that are designed to support us, but they end up creating more challenge because there's just so many of them. So there's that vital few that's really required to be successful. I do observe, and I put into my own programs with my clients, there is always a coaching element to it. Because when you are learning something, we talk about some of these skills. When you're learning something, there's awareness of the concept and learning about the concept. There's applying it, and then there's integrating it. Applying and integrating it comes to life through coaching. And so being able to master that skill as a leader or a manager, and being able to have that rapport and relationship with somebody on your sales team is really critical. So yes, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I observe it in my clients and in the industry, and where there are skill development programs that have a coaching element built into it, they are much more successful than if you didn't have that element built into it.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love about it is that accountability is no longer becoming a dirty word. Like I feel like it's been a dirty word for some reason for the past 8-9 years. Again, that's the feeling that I've gotten. I don't really have any proof behind that, but I love it. I think it's so helpful to hold each other accountable and have a coach hold you accountable in really good, productive ways. There's so many good things that come out of that for people's lives.
It's the productive piece of it, I feel, is the most important word. Sometimes accountability, it's like creating sales culture. Sales culture can be challenging to create and maintain, and it doesn't take a lot for it to get undermined. So the way in which an organization thinks, how they operate, all contributes to sales culture. Coaching and accountability are the same way. One of the productivity hacks I find with accountability is understanding how you respond to accountability and what will help you to be more accountable. And I can use myself as an example here in a second, but also understanding how your team responds to accountability and how they most like to create that environment of accountability. Sometimes that word of being held accountable is different than let's create some mutual accountability. So if I think about myself, I'm a pretty internally motivated, driven individual, but like anybody, I need to have that environment of accountability. So if I think about, this goes back a little bit, but when I was writing The Modern Seller, that was one of many things that was on my plate at that time. And what I needed a coach that would meet with me once a week, and that I had to show up to that meeting with X number of pages or words written. And I wasn't going to show up to that meeting without that done. Excuse me. So that was an accountability piece that we both agreed to, that I would do and that this individual would do. And that's what helped me get it done. Otherwise, you'd have just long chunks of time where there wouldn't be any work on it. So just understanding how I like to create accountability helped me to actually get that goal accomplished.
I sat in a Vistage presentation the other day, which was fascinating. It was on generational differences. So they looked at boomers down to Gen Z, and they started talking about generational differences. And one of the things that I didn't really take away, I don't think anything that they wanted me to take away. Maybe I did, but the biggest thing I took away was the individual nature of working together, and the critical need for that word in front of accountability that you just mentioned, which is mutual, right? I guess I did because the boomer and Gen before that, the traditionals were extremely hierarchical, right? Extremely hierarchical. Boss told you to do something, you did it. Doesn't matter whatever the boss did, you just did that because the boss said that. We have morphed in a big way, and I actually think it's a very positive way when it's about, okay, no, let's hold ourselves, and a good coach holds himself or herself very accountable to the results of the person that they're coaching, as well as does a good sales manager, and to the actions that they promise doing for that person. And I find without that word that you just brought up, which is mutual, that's where I was right. Accountability has gotten a bad name because it's just like it's this more traditional hierarchical that it doesn't flow a lot with today's workforce, with millennials or even Gen Xers. I took that out of that, but I'm wondering if you see something similar there.
Yeah, I'm going to add one thing to that maybe a bit of a different perspective, but I think is very complementary ultimately to accountability. Two things: the individual nature and the mutual agreement nature of accountability. I think it's really interesting to understand that and to sort of sit with that and figure out how that applies to you as a person, but also to your team. There is also this idea of there are some things that we need our sales teams to do and we need sales leaders to do that are not negotiable. It is part of the job. And I credit Anthony Iannarino with this because this is what he calls it. He calls it the 4 non-negotiables. And so when he is talking with sales leaders or managers, he might ask the question, what are your top 4 non-negotiables that your team has to do no matter what? So for example, prospecting might be on that list. So in addition to like mutual accountability, individual accountability, there is a place for what is considered to be not negotiable. And if somebody on the team doesn't do those things, that there's an issue that needs to be solved for. So I think there's a yes and with that.
That's awesome. I'm gonna shift. I'm gonna shift back to right at the beginning where we're talking about here was we were talking about the skill sets that we needed in both leadership management and sales. Now, I have a very specific question about a very specific skill set, which again is something that I'm seeing, but I want some confirmation in market, which is the face-to-face. Is the face-to-face coming back?
Yes. I say unequivocally yes. There is so much more energy in a face-to-face conversation. It truly can be replicated in a way in a virtual environment like what we're doing here, but it can't really be replaced. So if I use myself as an example, I spend my time in like 3 different places. I'm at my home office. I have an office co-working space, and then I'm with clients. And for me, that balance of those 3 locations is what gives me energy. If I were sitting in my home office all day, every day, I personally, that does not work for me. But I like to have different places and create different environments. I was at Outbound a couple weeks ago and was there for an entire week in San Antonio. And with 350 sellers and sales leaders, you cannot duplicate that energy and that level of information sharing and that camaraderie and the networking. You just can't replace it. It was phenomenal. And I think we've lost a little bit of that by being in our home offices or remote. And it's like inertia, that law of physics of a body at rest tends to stay at rest and a body in motion tends to stay in motion. Getting out and being with people face to face, that's the equivalent of being in motion. And you have more energy. You have more, I think, more decision-making capacity when you're in motion like that. So unequivocally, yes, it is making a comeback. And we as sales professionals and sales leaders have to, that's an accountability, I think. We have to make that happen.
Yeah, I look at it from a slightly different perspective, but I think fundamentally it has to come back, and it has to. It's starting. I've noticed the same thing, but when AI now has so much ability, right? I think the digital communication and the channels just get so confusing, and maybe it's just because of my limited ability to process it, but they get so confusing that I think the only way to distill information, it's not the only way, but the best way to distill information is when you get to start having the the face-to-face. And I'm actually really excited about it. Like I see more and more events and more, yeah, you know what, let's grab a cup of coffee or come by the office I know we're being asked more for it. I know others are. And it's just, I love it. I know it's going to increase costs, but hey, I think it can increase productivity.
100%. It can increase results too. One of the things that I do in all of my skill development programs is the first part of the program is all in person, and that's unless there's some extreme situation, that's pretty much a hard and fast requirement, because the learning that happens when you're together in person is very different than when you're in a virtual environment. What I do after that, and kind of to come back around to the coaching piece, once we've built that rapport in person and we've had that initial skill development in person, we continue it in a virtual environment with coaching. And this is where AI tools and the note-taking tools and the summary tools, they have personally saved me hours of time, because now I can come to a coaching conversation that's in a Zoom or a Teams, and I typically do it in small groups. I can really be focused on the conversation and not be focused on note-taking.
Yes.
So that conversation flows, we have some prompts, we have conversation, and the tool does that lifting. I review it and, add some things, but that's where AI has really been very helpful for me. But in person and then to virtual has been a good combination with a lot of the work that I do.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome. And that just points out that the next time we're going to do this, at least in 6 to 8 months, we're going to do this again. The next time we do it, we need to be sitting down across the table from each other.
All right. It's a deal. Mutual accountability. We'll make it happen.
We'll make it happen. Okay. We're almost at time, but there's one last question that I have for you. And it's really just an overall positive or negative. Like when you look at the state of sales today and the front lines of sales, both you doing it and all the people that you're working with, what's your feeling about the future of the B2B salesperson?
I'm an optimist. I always take the optimistic view of the future of this profession, the future of the B2B salesperson. I really believe the future's bright. I believe this is the best profession to be in. There is really no other profession where somebody can control their success and control their destiny. The fact that I have gotten into this profession is, I'm so thankful for it and that I get to do what I do. So I'm highly optimistic. What I will say, though, is that it will take the most successful B2B sellers will be the ones who are constantly aware of where they have opportunities to grow. They build the skills that we've talked about. They really take their own vested interest in their career. Those are the ones that are really going to thrive. Overall, I'm highly optimistic about the profession and the B2B sales professional.
That's awesome. So am I. We share that, and I love it. It's a great mission. It's a great field to be a part of. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing anything. How do people find Amy Franko if they want to find you and reach out?
The two best places to find me are LinkedIn, Amy Franko on LinkedIn, and also amyfranko.com.
All right. And I will make sure that in the show notes, we'll make sure that we put all the ways to connect. We'll get resources and access to her book and everything that you can have. Are you doing any shows in the near term? You just said Outbound. Are you doing any others in the near term?
We wrapped up Outbound, and for the rest of this year, it's I am wrapped up with shows for the rest of this year. So we'll get back into it next year.
Nice. Well, have an amazing, amazing holiday season, and thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much. Please go check out Amy's stuff, amyfranko.com, and check LinkedIn. Make sure you're reaching out if you have any questions or comments or feedback. You can also obviously comment on the posts that we have, and Amy will make sure that she responds to that. In the meantime, get out there, keep selling, keep shining bright, and have an amazing day. We'll see you.
Hey, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Art and Science of Complex Sales. I hope today's conversation provided you with valuable insights and practical ideas to help you and your team elevate the profession and succeed in today's complex world. This podcast is brought to you by Membrain.com. Membrain is the B2B growth platform for CEOs, sales leaders, and sales executives who are committed to sustainable growth and change. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a favor, like, subscribe, share it with your network. Your support really helps us bring more valuable insights from the best in the business straight to you. Also, check us out at Membrain.com. We're more than a technology. Membrain equips your teams with the expert coaches and trainers, amazing sales methodologies, process, people, and tools to continually improve and coach results. More than a CRM, it's a network, and it's designed to help your team execute with confidence, smash goals, and overall up your sales game. So we'll see you next time for another episode of the Art and Science of Complex Sales. And until then, as always, keep shining bright.